To think you know the Maya, the brilliant civilization of pyramids, calendars, and mathematics? Think again, and before we uncover the secrets they tried to bury, make sure you subscribe, like, comment, and share so you don't miss the darkest history they never taught you. Well, buckle up, because the real Maya world was so much darker, stranger, and more horrifying than anything your textbooks ever told you. A culture where kings pierced their own genitals with stingray spines, threading thorned ropes through open wounds until their blood soaked the temple floors. Where queens sliced their tongues and summoned visions of gods through rivers of pain. Where captives were forced into sexual rites at the very moment of their sacrifice, their seed and blood mingled as cosmic offerings. You're about to discover the shocking practices of the Maya that make modern horror films look tame. From ritual sex under starlit temples to public mutilations that turned flesh into sacred currency, from punishments so brutal they defied belief to ceremonies where intimacy and death fused into one act of devotion. These are the secrets that will shatter everything you thought you knew about this great civilization. Their bodies were not their own, they were altars. And their intimacy was not love, it was survival. 1. The shocking hook, blood, sex, and the gods. Picture this. A torch-lit pyramid rising out of the jungle night, its stone steps slick with the smoke of burning copal and the chants of priests rolling like thunder. At the summit, a young nobleman kneels, his body trembling, not from fear, but from anticipation. The crowd below watches in religious frenzy, thousands of eyes fixed on what is about to unfold. The priest approaches, not with a blade meant to end life, but with something far stranger, far more intimate. The spine of a stingray, honed to a serrated edge. In front of the entire community, the boy takes it into his own hands, and in an act that seems like madness to us, but holiness to them, he pierces his own penis. Not once, not twice, but again and again, until a rope studded with thorns can be threaded through the wounds. His blood pours freely, splattering onto strips of bark paper. The paper is gathered and set ablaze, the smoke carrying his very essence skyward to the gods. The crowd roars, not in horror, but in exaltation, because they believe this agony is the price of survival. His body has become an altar, his suffering a portal through which the universe itself is fed. This is not hidden. This is not shameful. It is celebrated, recorded in stone carvings, painted on pottery, sung in sacred hymns. And it is only the beginning. For the Maya, intimacy and blood were not private acts of love or desire. They were cosmic duties, acts of horror and ecstasy performed in public to ensure the sun would rise, the rains would fall, and the crops would grow. What you are about to hear will shatter every comfortable idea you have about this great civilization. Behind the precision of their calendars and the beauty of their pyramids lies a world of practices so horrific, so intimate, and so alien to us that they blur the line between devotion and madness. 2. Creation through carnality. To understand why the Maya went to such terrifying extremes, you must first enter their creation story. Unlike modern religions that separate body and spirit, the Maya saw the universe itself as born of a divine sexual act. The Popol Vuh, their sacred book, tells of gods who bled themselves to give life to the world. Their blood became the rivers, their sacrifice the sky, their essence the corn from which mankind was made. The creation was not clean. It was violent, erotic, and bloody. And in this worldview, it was not enough that the gods had done it once. Humanity had to repay the debt, to repeat the divine act over and over, or risk the collapse of the cosmos itself. Here's where it gets even more disturbing. For the Maya, semen and blood were not just fluids. They were the raw building blocks of existence, the sacred energies that made the world function. Blood was the seed of the gods. Semen was the seed of mankind. to combine them, to spill them deliberately, was to participate directly in creation itself. Imagine how different this is from our modern view. Where we see intimacy as personal and private, they saw it as public and cosmic. A king's semen was not his own. It was a tool of the state, a sacred essence that had to be offered at the right time under the right stars to ensure the survival of his people. Blood was not just inside the body, it was currency, fuel, divine nourishment. This meant that the line we draw today between the bedroom and the temple, between sex and religion, did not exist in Maya thought. Every intimate act, every drop of blood, was tied to cosmic balance. The body itself was a living altar, and to withhold its offerings was to starve the gods. This is why rituals of self-mutilation, ritual intercourse, and even human sacrifice were woven together. The Maya did not see them as separate categories of life. To them, sex, blood, and death were all threads in the same sacred fabric, a fabric that held the universe together, and this was only the foundation. What followed acts of public genital bloodletting, queens piercing their tongues with thorn ropes, captives forced into sexual rites before their hearts were ripped out, would make even the bravest shudder. Because for the Maya, intimacy was never just pleasure. It was an obligation, and obligation meant pain. 3. The body as a living altar. Picture this. You look at your own body, your skin, your heart, your breath, and think of it as your private vessel, your personal home. For the Maya, that idea was unthinkable. To them, the body wasn't yours. It wasn't even human in the way we understand it. The body was the universe in miniature, a living altar upon which the gods demanded rituals of blood and pain. Every part of the body mapped onto the cosmos. The head was the heavens, the dwelling place of divine thought. The heart was the sun itself, the blazing source of life and energy. The blood running through veins was the sacred rivers that nourished the earth. Bones were the sacred stones of creation, the eternal foundations of the world, and the genitals, those most private of organs, were not seen as shameful, but as portals to cosmic creation, the human echo of the gods' original act that brought the universe into being. This meant that when a king pierced his penis or a queen sliced her tongue, they weren't merely harming themselves. They were opening a gateway. Their blood wasn't just blood, it was a bridge. As the crimson drops soaked into bark paper and were burned into smoke, that smoke carried their life force upward to the gods. The body was the stage, the altar, and the offering all at once. To them, every wound was a prayer. Every scar was a covenant. The Maya elite displayed their willingness to bleed as proof of their right to rule. Their bodies became living records of sacrifice, marked with scars that were not signs of weakness, but badges of cosmic authority. Imagine living in a world where your flesh wasn't private, but public property, where your worth was proven not by your wealth or beauty, but by your willingness to tear yourself open for the gods. The Maya didn't build their pyramids to be admired from afar. They built them as theaters of flesh, stages where the human body was elevated, mutilated, and transformed into divine currency. It is a worldview so alien, so horrifying, that it makes our own ideas of intimacy and sacrifice look almost tame. Because for the Maya, the most sacred temple wasn't carved from stone, it was carved from flesh. 4. Auto-sacrifice. Pain as a portal. Now imagine this. A noble youth stands at the top of a pyramid, the crowd below chanting in feverish rhythm. He is not there to die at another's hand. He is there to offer himself, not by surrender, but by deliberate, conscious pain. This is auto-sacrifice, the most terrifyingly intimate ritual of the Maya world. He takes the stingray spine into his hands. Its jagged edge catches the torchlight, glinting with menace. The priests chant louder, the drums pound harder, and in a moment that defies comprehension, he presses it against his own penis and drives it through. The pain is instant, blinding, unbearable, but it is not punishment. It is exaltation. The wound gushes blood, the most sacred of all offerings. Yet one wound is not enough. Again and again he pierces himself, until a rope studded with sharp thorns can be threaded through the holes. The rope drags slowly, agonizingly, tearing flesh further, maximizing the flow of blood. His screams mix with the chants, echoing down the pyramid steps like a symphony of agony and devotion. The blood pours onto bark paper, soaked until it is heavy with life. The paper is then burned, and the smoke rises skyward, a divine telegram to the gods. To the Maya, this was not mutilation, it was communication. The pain was not meaningless suffering, but the key to transcendence. And it wasn't only men. Women too performed their own versions of this ritual. Queens pierced their tongues with thorn ropes, pulling them through until their mouths filled with blood. Their pain was believed to open visions, to summon ancestors and gods in the smoke of their sacrifice. Auto-sacrifice was not optional. It was duty. It was the way rulers proved their right to stand between their people and the gods. It was the way commoners showed loyalty in small drops of blood from ears or fingers. Pain was the portal, agony the prayer, blood the bridge. What shocks us today is the thought of willingly piercing the most sensitive parts of the body was for them the highest form of piety. To refuse was unthinkable. To endure was to be divine. 5. Women's role, the tongue of the queen. Picture this. The king has just finished his own gruesome ritual, pulling a thorn-studded rope through his penis until the bark paper beneath him is soaked in blood. The crowd trembles in awe, the smoke rises skyward, and now it is her turn, the queen. Lady Zok of Yaxchilan kneels in the torchlit chamber, her face painted with the sacred red of sacrifice. She is no silent consort, no passive observer. Her role is just as critical, and in some ways, even more terrifying. For while the king bleeds from the organ of creation, she will bleed from the organ of speech. The priestess presents her with the instrument, a rope embedded with the thorns of the sacred Seba tree, the tree that connected heaven, earth, and the underworld. With steady hands, Lady Zok presses a stingray spine against her tongue and pierces it through. The pain is immediate, searing, but she does not stop. Slowly, deliberately, she threads the thorn rope through the wound, pulling until her mouth fills with blood. The crimson torrent drips onto bark paper laid before her, saturating it until it is heavy. This paper is burned, the smoke rising in thick, twisting plumes. The people below watch in hushed reverence, for they believe this moment is a bridge, her suffering a key to the gods themselves. As the smoke engulfs her, Lady Zok begins to see visions. Out of the haze emerges the vision serpent, a colossal, otherworldly snake whose open jaws reveal the face of an ancestor spirit or deity. In this altered state, part pain, part trance, part hallucination, she receives messages of prophecy, whether her husband's war will be victorious, whether the crops will flourish, whether the city will endure. Her agony is not humiliation, but power. It legitimizes her role as queen, proves her connection to divine forces, and shows the people that their rulers are willing to suffer so that the cosmos will remain in balance. In Maya civilization, women were not excluded from this bloody theater. They were essential. Their bodies, like men's, were altars. Their tongues gave voice to the ancestors. Their wombs, their menstrual blood, their ability to give birth, all were seen as powerful conduits of divine energy. And when they bled by choice, publicly and painfully, they demonstrated that their lineage stretched back to the gods themselves. The Maya queen was not just a partner to the king. She was the mouth of the gods. Her screams were the voice of the cosmos. 6. Ritual intercourse, sex under the stars. Now imagine a night of intimacy, but strip away the modern notions of love, passion, or desire. For the Maya elite, sex was rarely about personal pleasure. It was a public obligation, carefully timed, meticulously calculated, and often overseen by priests. At the heart of this practice was the sacred 260-day calendar, the Tzolk'in. Every act of intercourse, especially among nobles and rulers, was believed to carry cosmic consequences. To conceive a child on the wrong day, an ill-omened date, risked bringing disaster upon both family and city. The child could be cursed, their soul tainted, their destiny warped. And so, priests and astrologers determined the right days when the stars aligned, when the gods would bless the union. Picture a king and queen brought together, not by passion, but by cosmic duty. Their chamber is lit not by candlelight, but by sacred torches. Outside, priests chant and mark the alignment of stars. When the moment comes, the act itself is not private. It is ritual, it is watched, it is judged. Phallic imagery carved into the stones of temples like Uxmal suggests that intercourse was sometimes enacted as part of religious ceremonies. Some scholars believe that ritual sex, even sacred prostitution, was performed to honor fertility deities. In these moments, participants were not seen as mere humans, but as vessels for divine power, their bodies channeling the creative energy of the gods into the earth itself. The act could also be linked directly to sacrifice. In certain rituals, intercourse and bloodletting combined semen and blood spilled together as offerings, the ultimate mingling of life forces to feed the hungry gods. The connection between fertility and pain was never far apart in the Maya worldview. But there was a darker side. Sexuality outside of this sacred framework was seen as dangerous, even polluting. Adultery could bring divine wrath upon the community. Punishments were brutal death by strangulation for women, a crushing stone to the skull for men. Every intimate act carried not just personal risk, but cosmic consequence. So while we might imagine the Maya as passionate lovers beneath jungle stars, the reality was far stranger. Sex was less about the individual and more about the cosmos. It was regulated by calendars, overseen by priests, and imbued with terrifying weight. The bedroom was an extension of the temple. The bed was another altar, and in the eyes of the gods, pleasure was secondary. Duty was everything. 7. Sacred prostitution and fertility. Rites picture this. The temple walls at Uxmal are covered in carvings not of battles, not of kings, but of phalluses. Dozens of stone erections, exaggerated and bold, rise from the architecture itself. To modern eyes, it looks obscene, even laughable. But to the Maya, this was not pornography. It was sacred power carved into stone, the very essence of fertility encoded into their holy spaces. Inside such temples, rituals of fertility unfolded that blur the line between worship and intimacy. Scholars have long debated whether the Maya engaged in forms of sacred prostitution, ritualized sexual acts performed as offerings to the gods. Evidence suggests that these weren't mere indulgences, but structured ceremonies designed to honor fertility deities and ensure the fecundity of the land. Imagine the scene. A woman chosen by the priesthood, her body painted with sacred symbols, steps into the torchlight. She is not a prostitute in the sense we know. She is a vessel. Her role is to channel the divine. The man who lies with her, perhaps a noble, perhaps a priest, does not see her as a lover. He sees her as a medium, a living altar through which the creative power of the gods can be renewed. Their act is witnessed, sanctified, and transformed into an offering. The people believe that the spilling of semen, like blood, fertilizes not only the earth, but the very balance of the cosmos. Some rituals may have been performed publicly, aligning with the Maya worldview that the most private human acts carried the greatest cosmic weight. In these moments, the boundary between flesh and divinity dissolved. But this practice wasn't limited to elites. Festivals dedicated to fertility gods may have included ritualized sexual encounters among commoners, symbolically reenacting the union of divine forces. What we would see as debauchery, they saw as a sacred duty, a way of ensuring that corn would grow, rains would fall, and the cycle of life would continue unbroken. It was not about love. It was not about pleasure. It was an obligation. The Maya believed their gods demanded offerings in flesh, and so they gave willingly, publicly, and often painfully. 8. Punishments for sexual pollution. But if sacred sexuality could nourish the cosmos, unsanctioned intimacy could poison it. To the Maya, sex was a double-edged blade. When performed at the right time, under the right stars, with the right rituals, it sustained the world. But when done wrongly, outside of cosmic order, it was considered catastrophic, a pollution that endangered the entire community. Adultery was one of the gravest offenses. A husband who discovered his wife unfaithful was not merely dishonored. He was cosmically wronged, and the gods demanded retribution. Punishments were brutal, intimate, and public. An adulterous man might be handed over to the wronged husband, who had the legal right to crush his skull with a stone. Women were often strangled, their deaths seen as cleansing the cosmic stain of their betrayal. There was no such thing as a private sin. Every act of intimacy was woven into the community's spiritual fabric. If one person polluted it, everyone bore the risk of divine wrath, drought, famine, disease. Sexual misdeeds weren't just betrayals of trust. They were seen as ruptures in the sacred order, tears in the cosmic veil that could unravel the stability of the world itself. Even the suspicion of transgression was dangerous. In some records, trials for sexual offenses included humiliating public ordeals where the accused had to endure shaming rituals or even physical tests of their innocence. To be found guilty was to be condemned not only by society, but by the gods. This obsession with purity extended beyond adultery. Intercourse during forbidden times, such as periods of ritual fasting, war preparation, or menstruation, was seen as polluting and dangerous. Warriors were expected to abstain before battle, believing that spilled semen weakened their life force. Menstrual blood, while powerful, was also considered volatile. Women were often secluded to prevent their energy from interfering with sacred duties. The message was clear. Intimacy was not a personal right. It was a cosmic responsibility. And failure to obey could mean brutal death. In this way, the Maya created a world where every kiss, every touch, every moment of desire carried the weight of the universe. One misstep, one wrong act, and you weren't just risking your own life. You were gambling with the fate of your people. 9. The darkest fusion, sex and death. Picture this. A captive lord, painted blue, stands trembling at the top of a pyramid. He was once a ruler, a commander of armies, but now he is nothing more than an offering. His body is stripped, his dignity erased, yet his role in this final ritual is far from over. For the Maya, the line between intimacy and death blurred into a single terrifying act. There are depictions in Maya, art showing captives engaged in intercourse at the very moment of their sacrifice, their semen and blood spilling together as twin offerings to the gods. Imagine it, the mingling of the most private human act with the most violent, the orgasm and the death cry fused into one moment of cosmic ecstasy. To us, this is unbearable. To them, it was the ultimate act of devotion. The victim became a god in the moment of his demise, his blood fertilizing the earth, his seed nourishing the cosmos, his body consumed by both flame and flesh. For in some ceremonies, cannibalism followed. The heart was torn from his chest, still beating, offered high to the sun. His body rolled down the steps, sometimes butchered, his flesh eaten so that his power, his essence, could be absorbed by the victors. This was no private horror. The entire city watched. The screams, the drums, the chants, all merged into a single sound, the roar of a people who believed that without this spectacle, the sun itself might not rise again. The fusion of sex and death was not an aberration, but a cornerstone of their worldview. Life and fertility were inseparable from blood and sacrifice. Semen was corn, blood was rain. To offer both at once was to renew creation itself. And so, what we see as perverse and grotesque, they saw as necessary, even holy. This is the darkest intimacy imaginable, where the most vulnerable act of creation is bound to the most violent act of destruction, a union of flesh, pain, and faith designed to keep the cosmos alive. 10. Collapse and legacy. Blood that fed and destroyed. For centuries, this system of intimacy and sacrifice held Maya civilization together. Kings bled to prove their divine right. Queens screamed as they pulled ropes through their tongues, summoning visions of the gods. Captives were sacrificed in orgiastic spectacles of blood and sex, their suffering transformed into cosmic currency. But this system came at a cost. The more the gods demanded, the more the rulers provided. Endless wars were fought not for land, but for captives to sacrifice. Crops withered, droughts deepened, yet the answer was always the same. More blood, more pain, more intimacy turned into offerings. The cycle became unsustainable. As the 9th century approached, the great cities of the southern lowlands began to collapse. Pyramids that once echoed with chants fell silent. The jungle reclaimed temples once splattered with blood. The kings who could not bring rain, who could not satisfy the gods, lost legitimacy. Their people abandoned them. The system that had once bound society together, that terrifying union of sex, blood, and sacrifice, began to unravel. And yet, the echoes did not vanish. When the Spanish arrived centuries later, they were horrified by what they found. Remnants of bloodletting, whispers of ritual intimacy, and the bones of countless sacrificed children dredged from sacred cenotes. To the conquistadors, these were the practices of demons, justification for conquest. They burned the Maya books, erased their temples, tried to sever them from their gods. But the Maya spirit did not die. Even today, in the highlands of Chiapas and Guatemala, echoes remain rituals where blood, smoke, and offerings continue. Churches blend Catholic saints with ancient deities. The cross is not just Christ's symbol, but the ceiba tree, the world axis of Maya cosmology. The old gods wear new masks, but they are still there, lingering in every whispered prayer and every offering of blood or liquor. The most horrific, intimate practices of the Maya shock us because they force us to confront a truth we'd rather ignore, that human beings are capable of binding sex and death, love and agony, devotion and destruction into a single act of faith. For the Maya, it was the foundation of civilization. For us, it is a chilling mirror, reminding us how fragile our definitions of morality and intimacy truly are. The ruins of their temples still rise from the jungle, silent and overgrown. But if you stand among them long enough, you can almost hear the echoes, the chanting, the screams, the mingled ecstasy and agony of a people who believed their bodies were not their own, but vessels to feed the gods. Their civilization fell, their practices horrify us, but their legacy endures, haunting, unforgettable, a testament to the terrible power of belief and the blood-soaked intimacy that kept their world alive.